14 African nations got their independence from France in 1960, then signed a pact to deposit 50% of their foreign reserves into the French Treasury, not their own central banks, France's. They called it independence. France called it the CFA Franc. The contract is still active, but now one Nigerian billionaire is making it structurally obsolete from the inside. Most disruptions to colonial financial architecture don't start with politicians. They start with men who decide to build something that repel the system. Aliko Dangote looked at Africa's import dependency and saw it for what it was, not a market gap, but a structural wound. By 2026, Dangote Group spans cement, petroleum refining, fertilizer, sugar production, and moving aggressively into ports, pipelines, power, gas, mining, and data centers. He recently sat across from the CEO of the world's largest sovereign wealth fund and told him he plans to invest $45 billion more. His net worth sits at approximately $35.9 billion. That is not a businessman building a company. That is a man building an alternative economy, and it is threatening something France built in 1945 and has quietly maintained ever since. Most people think colonialism ended by declaration of independence. No, it didn't. It simply evolved. Most African leaders in 1960 did not fully grasp that you don't need to occupy a territory to control it. You just need to control its money. The CFA Franc was created in 1945, originally standing for Colonie Française d'Afrique. When independence came, France didn't dissolve the currency. They renamed it. 14 nations signed on to it and handed France 4 instruments of financial control most people have never heard explained clearly. The exchange rate. The CFA franc is pegged to the euro, controlled by Frankfurt. A drought in Burkina Faso, a manufacturing boom in Côte d'Ivoire. None of it moves the rate. Paris decides. The reserve deposit. Every CFA nation is required to deposit a portion of its foreign exchange reserves into an operations account held at the French Treasury. For decades, that figure was 65%. After sustained international pressure, it was reduced to 50%. Half of what these nations earn from their exports, their oil, their cocoa, their cotton, their gold, sits in Paris. The convertibility guarantee, which sounds generous until you understand it, means no African central bank can pursue independent monetary policy without France's approval. Any move that might threaten convertibility requires France's consent. You cannot have monetary sovereignty when a foreign government holds veto power over your central bank. And finally, the one nobody mentions, France maintained the right to seat representatives on CFA central bank boards, not as observers, as participants, foreign nationals inside your monetary policy meetings with access to your financial data. This is not ancient history. This structure ran largely intact into the 21st century. In 2021, Mali expelled the French ambassador. Burkina Faso followed in 2022. Niger ordered French troops off its soil in 2023 and began discussing CFA exit. These 3 nations formed the Alliance of Sahel States, the first bloc since 1960 to treat the CFA franc as what it actually is, a colonial instrument. France froze financial assistance almost immediately. The IMF suspended program disbursements. The message was clear. The currency was never just a convenience, it was leverage. But here is what France did not anticipate. The cost of exiting the CFA system is lower in 2026 than it has ever been because something changing inside the continent, not in a government or treaty, but in manufacturing. The CFA trap functions because CFA nations are structurally dependent on imports, fuel, cement, fertilizer, food. Every import paid for in foreign currency that bleeds out of the continent. Remove the imports, the trap loses its teeth. That is exactly what Dangote is doing. Cement. Dangote Cement is sub-Saharan Africa's leading producer, with 55 million tons of annual capacity across 14 countries. The strategic target is explicit: make West and Central Africa cement self-sufficient. In October 2025, Dangote commissioned a 3 million metric ton plant in Côte d'Ivoire, a direct investment of 100 billion CFA francs. Côte d'Ivoire is a CFA Franc country. He is not threatening the system from the outside, he is building inside it. Petroleum. In February 2026, the Dangote refinery hit its full designed capacity of 650,000 barrels per day, the first refinery globally to achieve full nameplate capacity in a single train of that scale. The downstream impact was immediate. By February 2026, domestic refineries supplied 36.5 million liters of fuel daily, with imports contributing just 3 million liters, 92% of Nigeria's national supply coming from inside the country. And the refinery is now exporting to Cameroon and Togo, both CFA Franc countries, keeping African foreign exchange inside the continent. Fertilizer. Africa spends billions annually importing agricultural inputs. Dangote's Vision 2030 targets quadrupling fertilizer production from 3 million tons to 12 million tons annually, positioning the group as the world's largest urea producer. Every ton produced locally is a ton Africa stops importing. France built a system that required Africa to stay dependent enough to need it. Dangote is building the industrial capacity that makes that requirement obsolete. What France built in 1945 and quietly maintained through 16 independence ceremonies was not just a currency, it was a verdict that African nations could have flags, anthems, and presidents, but not the one thing that makes sovereignty real: control over their own money. That verdict is being appealed in the streets of Niger, in the cement plants of Abidjan, in the refinery towers of Lagos. The contract is still active, but for the first time in 60 years, it cannot survive what is being built against it. The CFA franc was designed to last forever. So was Standard Oil.